It's getting trickier to spot fakes online, right? I mean, photos, videos, and even voices are getting so good that it's hard to tell what's real anymore. And guess what? It's only going to get crazier. Soon, anyone will be able to clone their voice and fool people anywhere in the world. So, how do we tackle these digital fakes? Well, we've got to dive into the shocking truth behind one of the first big cases of AI voice cloning. Stick around, this is going to be eye-opening. Imagine receiving a phone call from your boss. The voice is identical, the accent, the tone, even the way he clears his throat. But what if that voice wasn't real? What if it was just a highly realistic imitation generated by artificial intelligence? Well, that nightmare scenario became a reality for energy company executives in the UK back in 2019. And they couldn't believe their ears when they heard the following. On the surface, it was just another normal working day at the London headquarters of the British energy company. But around 11 a.m. the CEO received a call from his boss, the director of the German parent company. His name was not revealed. He called to discuss an urgent payment that needed to be made. It was for 220,000 euros. The supplier was based in Hungary and needed the money quickly. The CEO asked for more information. Who was the supplier? Why was the payment needed? He didn't know any of this. But then his boss gave him the crucial details. He told the CEO the supplier's name and IBAN number. He also explained that the company had been experiencing supply shortages and that this urgent payment would help solve the issue. It all sounded very plausible. But then something strange happened. The usually composed and rational CEO started to panic. After hearing his boss's explanation, he immediately contacted the finance department and told them to make the payment immediately. There was no time to ask questions. This was an emergency. Within minutes, the 220,000 euros were debited from the UK company's account and transferred to the supplier in Hungary. It was done. The crisis was over. But within an hour, the CEO got a call from his finance team. They were shocked. The money was gone. The account into which the transfer had been made was empty. The money had been moved almost instantly to other accounts across Europe before finally disappearing into an account in Mexico. By the time investigators had traced the trail, it was too late. The money was gone. They never found out what the 220,000 euros had been used for. The case was eventually closed with the money written off as a bad debt. The CEO couldn't believe what had happened. It still seemed impossible that they could have been scammed. Surely nobody could fool them. But then the truth hit him like a ton of bricks. The voice on the phone hadn't been his boss's at all. It had been an AI-generated deep fake built by criminals using voice synthesis software trained on hours of the real director's speech. In other words, the criminals had cloned his voice and used it to trick him. At first, it seemed like an inside job. Maybe someone in accounting had colluded with the scammers. But after a thorough investigation, the company concluded that no one had been involved. Somehow the criminals had managed to steal the voice of their boss and use it to trick the CEO himself. But how? It sounded crazy, but it was actually fairly simple. AI voice clone uses short recordings of speech to create synthetic models. This technology has been around for years, but it wasn't until recently that it had become sophisticated enough to be used by criminals. The most common type of AI voice clone is the autoregressive model. This type of model is trained on a large amount of text data and then uses that data to generate new text. This new text is generated word by word, with each word being predicted based on the previous words in the sequence. This process is repeated until a full sentence or paragraph has been generated. These models are capable of generating incredibly realistic text that can often be indistinguishable from human-generated text. In order to create an AI voice clone, criminals only need two things. First, they need access to a large amount of the target's speech data. This data can be gathered from publicly available sources such as the internet or social media. Once the criminals have gathered enough data, they need to find a way to train an AI model on that data. This training process can be time-consuming and resource-intensive, but it can also be done relatively easily. There are a number of services that offer AI training, many of which are free to use. With the right software, criminals can generate near-perfect imitations of anyone's voice. And the best part is that it doesn't require any special equipment. All you need is a computer and some basic knowledge of how to use AI software. Using this method, the criminals were able to fool the CEO of a major energy company. When the company realized what had happened, they were shocked. How could this have happened? How could someone have cloned their boss's voice and used it to trick them? The answer, unfortunately, is that it's easier than you think. In recent years, voice cloning has become a popular topic in the AI community. Researchers have developed new methods that allow them to create clones that are nearly indistinguishable from the originals. In some cases, these clones are so realistic that they can fool even the target's friends and family. As the technology continues to develop, it's likely that voice cloning will become even easier. This means that it's only a matter of time before another high-profile CEO is fooled by a voice clone. The case of the energy company was the first of its kind. It was the first time that criminals had used voice cloning to target a major company. But since then, similar cases have been popping up all over the world. In 2020, for example, a group of cybercriminals stole millions of dollars from a bank in Taiwan using a voice clone of one of the bank's executives. The criminals called the bank posing as the executive and convinced the employees to transfer the money to a different account. The employees were fooled because the voice clone was so realistic. They couldn't tell that it was fake. Another case occurred in the United States in 2021. A man received a call from his elderly father's bank manager. The bank manager informed him that someone had tried to transfer $27,000 from his father's account to a foreign account. The bank manager asked for verification that the transfer was legitimate, but the son denied any involvement. The bank manager then asked the son to confirm his father's date of birth. To his horror, the imposter already knew the correct date of birth. At this point, the son became suspicious and refused to provide any more information. However, the imposter persisted and eventually convinced the son to confirm his own mother's maiden name, which was correct. The imposter then apologized for the mistake and hung up. It's important to note that both the Taiwanese bank and the US bank were initially fooled by the voice clones. Only after the money had been transferred did they realize what had happened. These cases are just the tip of the iceberg. There are many other cases of voice cloning scams that go unreported. Many people are hesitant to come forward because they feel embarrassed about being fooled. So, what can we do to stop these scams? One approach is to educate people about the risks of voice cloning. It's important that people are aware of the risks and know how to protect themselves. There are a few simple things that people can do to reduce their risk of being scammed. For example, people should never give out personal information over the phone. They should also be wary of any phone calls that seem suspicious, even if the voice on the other end sounds familiar. In addition, people should consider using caller ID services to help verify the identity of callers. Another approach to stopping voice cloning scams is to develop new technologies that can detect deep fakes. Several companies are working on developing software that can identify AI-generated voices. This type of software could be a game changer in the fight against voice cloning scams. If we can develop software that is accurate and reliable, it could help to stop these scams before they start. However, there is one major obstacle in the way of developing this type of software. It's difficult to collect data on the AI-generated voices. Without data, it's impossible to develop an effective detection system. Fortunately, several organizations are working to address this problem. For example, the Partnership on AI is a group of leading AI researchers and companies that are working together to advance the field of AI research, of the work of leading AI researchers and companies that are working together to advance the the field of AI research on the field of language innovative is and confidential. One of the organization's goals is to develop better methods for detecting AI-generated content. Ultimately, the best way to stop voice cloning scams is to do both. We need to educate people about the risks of voice cloning and develop new technologies that can detect deep fakes. If we can take these two approaches, we can stop these scams before they start and protect ourselves from the growing threat of AI-generated content. This was the first high-profile case of AI voice fraud, but not the last. Deepfake voice scams are growing worldwide. The lesson: in a world where voices can be faked, trust must be verified in new ways. Would you be able to tell the difference? Comment below and subscribe to NextGen Tech for more true stories of AI technology.